On last week's show, we explored together 8 battlefields that hosted 8 teams hoping to fill up the last 4 spots in CAF's most prestigious inter-club competition. On this week's show, we're going to preview the last 4 teams standing. In the CAF Champions League, Igamalami Uadelani Folashayo Gurinade, and you're currently watching yet another exciting episode of the FA Show. Stay tuned for SC Khadebe's world-class analysis and so much more. Of course, it wouldn't be another world-class episode of the FA Show without testing your football knowledge. On today's show, I simply want to know if you know how many times RS Berkane have competed in the final of the CAF Confederations Cup. SC is going to be giving us the answer to that question later on, but for now, let's talk about the FIFA Club World Cup, SC. Now, Africa doesn't seem like it's well represented.
Before I get into that, these music videos that you shoot, I can see why. You look clean. You look clean.
Well, what do you mean by that? I look clean every week.
You look well, man. You look well. But nonetheless, without taking much of a time on this conversation, the list of appointed World Cup officials for 2025 Club World Cup has come out, and we see that only African officials that are there. So we look at that in depth, you know.
So, when Al Ahly cancelled the Cairo derby a few weeks back, are they justified now? Because they cancelled it for these reasons. They felt like the officiating on the continent is not up to standard.
Yeah, we can look at it like that, Ade, and say they look to be justified because of the number of refs that we have representing us in these continental spaces. And them coming out and saying we only need foreign referees to officiate our matches, especially the top 3 games that they play, you know, in Egypt. You look at that alone. It then answers them to say, yes, definitely, they've been actually answered correctly so by appointing such a limited number of refs. But for me, again, it brings back the question to say, are we doing a justice to our own officials as media houses, as people that support the game? Are we giving our refs enough? You know, there's so many countries in the continent that we could point out to. Of course, you can point out to South Africa where officials currently are not doing so well, you know, but there are other countries that are doing so well. You look at a small country such as Madagascar, you look at that, they've got 1 official in there. It tells you that there's work that has been done into this.
Yes, the FIFA Club World Cup is coming up on the 14th of June to the 13th of July. It's going to be exciting. Now, let's start talking about another exciting competition. We started the conversation last week talking about Mamelodi Sundowns and Al Ahly and the fireworks that are expected tonight. Yeah,
completely, you know. The 2 teams that we are going to talk about in this one are 2 teams that are playing in the Club World Cup. They don't come bigger than this, you know. Titled a so-called African derby, Sundowns versus Al Ahly, and Sundowns starts at home. You have to date it back to 2001. This is when these 2 teams started bossing this competition. Specifically Al Ahly, you know, they've been bossing the competition all day around. And Sundowns comes up and says, 2007, you guys are going to see something different from us. And when you even look at the numbers alone, it speaks to that. You look at the 2 coaches also. Marcel Cole has done an amazing job with Al Ahly, you know, breaking boundaries and breaking history in terms of this team, you know. So for me, I look at the fixture and I say, it's going to be humdinger and fireworks.
Yes, Cardoso's teams, we know from the group stages, they've been a bit stingy. They've kept 2 clean sheets. Yeah. They've conceded 4 goals. They've scored 5. Are these stats showing us that Mamelodi Sundowns basically have what it takes to defeat Al Ahly?
I can agree to what you're saying. You know why I can agree to that? It's because I think the coach that comes in, which is Miguel Cardoso that we're speaking of, he comes into this team with a different psychology and a different approach to the game. We've seen a Sundowns that has been so rampant when you look at the group stages. And this time around, Sundowns has not been that rampant team that we see, you know, under a former coach, which is Rulani Mokoena, who was so rampant in the competition. And Miguel Cardoso comes and says, I'll do it the Al Ahly way, you know. It doesn't have to be so clean. And both teams come into it as teams that were runners-up in their groups. And it shows you that.
So psychologically, the fact that their last 7 meetings, Mamelodi Sundowns hasn't lost to Al Ahly. 4 wins, 3 draws. Does that do anything psychologically to the Egyptians?
Of course it is. I mean, you can go to the last two fixtures these two teams had. I mean, the second last one, it was a 1-0. You look at that alone, it says Sundowns are on the up and up in terms of confidence. But then again, you have to point reference what they've done domestically. You know, you look at Al Ahly drawing with Pyramids, not an easy fixture to come out of. You look at Sundowns, who have just lost a cup game against Kaizer Chiefs. You know. Do they come into these games ready for each other? I think they are. Things are leveled up. You look at the two stats, 5 wins on both sides, 6 draws. It tells you much that Sundowns is coming into this fixture on a very interesting note in terms of the form card that they are on. Al Ahly, with the injuries they've had, they've mastered this competition.
Okay, so give us your predictions quickly. Mamelodi Sundowns, Al Ahly, the first leg.
There's not much of a scoreline that happens between the two teams. You know, it's 1-0 there, 2-0 there. But Sundowns will look to that 5-2 drubbing, to be more precise. They look to that fixture and say, them coming at home, we've managed to score so many goals. And they look to that and say, can we cause an upset? And Ahly will want to consolidate when they come here because they don't overly go on a mission and say, we want to win the game. But I think Sundowns will come out 2-0 victors in this game.
Sundowns 2-0 victors. I think concentration is definitely going to be key in this tie. And when we look at Orlando Pirates versus Pyramids, now there are only 2 teams on the continent right now that can win the treble, and it's Pyramids. Also, they're up there, they could win the treble because they're in the final of the Egyptian Cup against Zamalek. They're also on top of their league, and
talk about
again
a team
in this competition, a team in form.
Talk about a team in form making this stages for the very first time.
Yes.
It's so amazing to see Pyramids push themselves.
And Orlando Pirates could still do it in the league, in the PSL.
I love what Pirates does. You know, when you look at these boot camps they have, and they put it on YouTube and on camera for us to say, they've termed it the last dance, and definitely it is a last dance when you look at it the way they've been pushing it, both in the league and in the CAF Champions League. Jose comes as a stable coach who says, you know what, I want to break history. And for me, and I look at Jose and I say, amongst the coaches that Pirates have had, he's up there. You know, you feel Ruud Krol's, he's definitely on top of that list. So this fixture is going to be a humping out of a fixture. And alone, Pyramids have just qualified to be in this position. And Pirates has had a 10-year absence out of this competition.
But then Pirates haven't been beaten in this competition. You know that they have 8 wins in this competition.
Yeah.
4 draws.
You rightly so in terms of saying that Pyramids can come out and say the same thing with them, with the 5 wins that they have. It speaks volumes. But then again, we need to look at the goals. Pirates doesn't concede and they don't score a lot.
And Pyramids have conceded 10.
They've conceded 10 and they've scored 31 goals. And
31
it speaks volumes when you look at that. 2 contrasting style of play, 2 teams that play something very interesting. But also you have to look at the key players of both these teams. You've got a Rilehule Mfukeng. They call them the Coco Melons. You've got a Ngota in that team. Yes. In the Pirates setup, you know, those boys are doing something interesting. You've got Zibis who've just found form into the team. You move on to the Pyramids players. You've got Fiston Maela there who's sitting up top there with 6 goals. That speaks a lot. You've got Ibrahim Abdel, 9 assists overall.
Yes, and Pyramids are good with set pieces. Also, Mohamed Shibi is also another player that one should look out for. But Orlando Pirates definitely could exploit, for me, their aging defense. There's so much to talk about. You just have to stay tuned for the second part of the show.